I'm here to introduce the chair of the next session. Jenny Bullough is going to organize the workflow panel. She works at Harlequin. She's the manager of digital assets at Harlequin. She's worked there in book publishing for nearly 20 years and has acquired and edited fiction and nonfiction for print and digital publications. At Harlequin, she's responsible for text file coordination, ebook production, and the creation and maintenance of metadata for, wait for it, 300 print and ebook titles a month. Jenny.
Thank you, and thanks, Laura, and thank you for those gasps of shock and awe from the audience. I always appreciate that. This is a panel session on the topic of the state of ebook production. This is a follow-up to last year's panel discussion, which was a really good discussion on standards in ebook development, and we thought this year we'd like to explore what's changed in the past year. Are we any closer to the elusive ebook unicorn, the one format to rule them all? I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists. Welcome back to the stage, Colleen Cunningham, the senior ebook developer at F&W, as we saw in her presentation before lunch. A publishing professional with 20 years of in-house design experience, her current areas of focus are ebook production and CMS workflows, as was aptly demonstrated. She's also an adjunct professor at Emerson College, teaching courses in ebook production, and has presented many sessions and workshops on the subject, like this morning's. Charles Joseph has been building iOS apps and working with ebooks for more than 5 years. Up until recently, he was the principal developer on Kobo's iOS team, but now he's off working on something new in a different space with an outfit called the Young Astronauts. So look out, Chris Hadfield. Joshua Tallent has been an ebook developer since 2002 and is a well-known expert and teacher in the field. He's currently the chief ebook architect at Firebrand Technologies, where he and his team provide consulting and quality assurance services to publishers and authors, most recently creating Flight Deck, the most robust EPUB quality assurance tool available. Welcome, everybody. So we have some questions to frame the conversation, but I do plan to leave hopefully ample time for comment from the audience at the end to really make this a dialogue and not just a Q&A period. To start us off, I'd like to ask the panelists, what do you think has changed since last year's panel? Are we any closer to one format to rule them all, one standard? Starting off with an easy one. Come on, softball.
The short answer? Slightly.
Slightly, that's good.
Yeah. I think we're making, this is just my opinion, of course, but I think we're making small progresses here and there with the adoption of better reading systems, better support for EPUB 3 on different reading systems. We're seeing things get better over time. And I think that that is starting to snowball just a little bit as we've seen Readium progress, and we've seen reading systems start to implement Readium as a foundation for their display engine. You know, there's a lot of things that are happening, and people starting to see the value in doing that, and starting to see the benefit in taking the time to implement support for better features. That makes it easier to make a single file that works across multiple devices, and then you have to still have the hacks and the things you have to do for older devices.
Yeah, I don't know about one format to rule them all, but you know, just inside of Kobo, we saw a lot more, communication inside the company and better care taken in terms of supporting EPUB 3 features and being more aware of our limitations and sort of roadmap for that. And on the other side, also a little more content coming down that was adopting the newer standards rather than just doing weird things with EPUB 2. So I think it's getting better.
For our workflow, we don't consider that much has changed at all, but only because we work a lot in basic, flexible, reflowable EPUBs. We do create EPUB 3 EPUBs, but for the next year, we're going to start to integrate more markup where we can, where it doesn't break. And even as far as fragmentation, and Joshua, please don't leave the stage when I say this, but we don't make a Kindle file. We make an EPUB that has appropriate Kindle CSS in it and send it on its way.
That's perfectly fine. You know, I think I've said for many years that I think that there's a valid reason to build a separate Kindle file, but that applies to specific projects now, whereas before it was a requirement. Today it's not a requirement. Amazon's done a lot of work to accept EPUB 3 and EPUB 2 files. they've done a really great job of kind of adapting their ingestion to handle that kind of stuff. And as things have gotten better and, the quality of design has gotten better, I think we're to the point now where that's for 80%, 90% of the books that are out there, that's perfectly fine. I still do think, we talked yesterday in the workshops, there was a lot of discussion about fixed layout, and obviously you can't do that with fixed layout because the Kindle fixed layout format is so different than EPUB. But for reflowable content, if you do a good job in the code, then you're fine. You can build a book that'll work in those different places. You have to be careful about CSS you're using. The things that you're doing are the things that should be done. You have to be careful about what you're doing and think about it and prepare for it and test it, and not just expect that, oh, it works in iBooks, it'll work in the Kindle if I give it to Amazon.
So that's actually a really good segue to talk about another topic that was a big point of discussion at last year's panel, which is, of course, device fragmentation. And at last year's panel, Jean Kaplansky, who I believe is in the audience, made a great point that specifications are really ultimately their suggestion. They're what they would like us to do. And to some extent, device fragmentation is just a reality that ebook developers have to contend with and have to plan for, much as you're saying. So on that note, do we think maybe that our expectations that there will eventually be one format that will be interoperable across all devices is incorrect, given that types of paper treatment and ink affect how highly designed books will render on different types of print in the physical format. Websites will look different on your laptop versus on your mobile device. Authors can't control how readers are going to interpret the text, just as publishers can't necessarily control the way their text is going to render outside of a highly designed and controlled print book. So maybe just accepting fragmentation and preparing for it is the way to go. Do you have thoughts on that?
When I took a journalism class in high school, our journalism teacher said, if you want to know the root of any problem, follow the money. And I feel like that applies in this case because sending a book to print, printers just basically performed a service. They were a service industry, and we paid them for a very specific thing, and they didn't really care what happened after that, as long as the book looked good. When it comes to ebook vendors, however, they have a definite financial stake in how many books of ours that they are selling, and so I just don't see them having any incentive. If they feel they're making money, then why should they accommodate what we want?
Well, I think it's more than that, too. It's not just a question of whether they want to accommodate what we want. It's also them trying to provide the best experience for their consumers the way they think that's going to work, because that's their market, right? Amazon does this. They're known for this. They work really hard to help consumers enjoy their books, buy more books, et cetera, and they think they know that market better than a publisher does because they're a retailer. They think they know retailing better than publishers do. And honestly, I think they've done a rock solid job of it. If they hadn't, they wouldn't be selling as many books as they sell. So the question is, how can we adapt to that, learn more about that, and give more input to that issue as publishers? And I think that there's a lot publishers can learn from retailers, but a lot of the retailers can also learn from publishers. What we have to do is get on the same page and deal with these questions of navigation and functionality, and start saying, hey, if we could create books that have better footnotes in them or have better functionality for sidebars or whatever, could you sell it, right? And work with all the retailers to help them understand what we're trying to get across to the reader so that they can understand how to sell that better so that we can all make more money.
Yeah, I think a big point is coming out of that, what you're both saying, at least what I'm hearing, is that communication's super important, and communication between vendors and publishers and e-production professionals. And I think fragmentation is just something we have to live with, and your comment about treating the spec more as guidelines than hard rules is fairly apt. And a big project I worked on at Kobo last year was we put together what we first called the Kobo EPUB specifications, which we put up on GitHub. And we were just trying to document as much as possible the different things to watch out for on our different reading systems and best practices and things like that. And maybe a few months in, I forget who, but someone pointed out, like, you know what, we should rename this. And so we changed it to guidelines. And I think that's just the reality we have to live in, that they're guidelines, and being aware of the different fragmentation and the limitations is the best course.
There's also, if you look at the EPUB spec, if you ever read it, it actually has flexibility built into it. Because reading system manufacturers are not required to support every single feature of EPUB 3. It's intended to be flexible so reading system manufacturers can decide what's going to be appropriate for their device, for their readers, what can they actually implement, what do they have time and money to implement. Because it costs a lot of money. I mean, if you look at things like CFIs or even implementing things like video and audio, it can be pretty expensive for a manufacturer of devices to implement those features in their reading system. They have to spend developer hours to do it, and where's the return of investment for them? So we have to, as publishers, remember that there's an incentive. If we can sell more books through those retailers, there's an incentive for them to go implement those features we want to see. So yeah, the specs are, in a sense, the specs are a guideline, but in reality, the specs are not a standard. I think Gene Caplancy has made this point before, that the EPUB specification is not a standard. It's not a requirement, it is a specification. And so we have to work within the boundaries of that. So does that mean that device fragmentation will continue? Yeah, I think it will. I think it has to do with, like Colleen just said, where's the money? If the retailers can't make money selling the ebooks that we're already giving them, then they're not going to make more money selling ebooks that we give them that have more stuff that they don't already support. So we have to find ways of communicating better, working together better to make the functionality work for consumers and to fix the issues that we're seeing in how consumers are adopting ebooks. If ebooks are not selling more than 25% of total book sales, and we've seen a plateau, it's because ebook readers don't want to buy more ebooks. It's because they don't like them. It's because they don't like the functionality. It's because they don't want to read them in some. Why is that? We're not asking the right question in that regard. We have to think about, why are consumers no longer buying more ebooks? Why are we not seeing an uptick in sales? It's not because of because they don't like ebooks, because ebooks are horrible. It's because they don't like ebooks because they don't work.
Well, I think when I teach, I try to say that ebooks and e-readers go together. They can't exist one without the other. So would you say it's more that the ebooks we're developing might not be good enough, or are the e-readers part of the problem?
Both.
Yeah.
I think it's both.
Yeah, definitely both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and this, I come from, my background originally in ebooks was in Bible software, and I've probably told everybody in this room this at least once, but there's a proprietary nature in Bible software systems where the software manufacturer controls not only the software itself, but also the ebook content behind the scenes and the creation of those ebooks. And that symbiosis between the content and the reading platform gives you more control over the display and the functionality to the user. So you're able to do some really awesome things when you control both things. This is why Amazon controls the Kindle format so strictly, because they know if they can control the format and control the reading system in some way, then they can give a better user experience to the consumer. This is why Apple invented iBooks Author. They want to control both the format and the reading system. And when you have that, then you have the ability to do more. And I think that's where we need to be considering, how can we, at the same time we want to cut back on costs of production, because all of us are struggling with production costs, we still have to think about, how do we make that integration between the content and the platform work better so that we can cut down on the differences? I don't know. That's a really big open question, and maybe you guys have thoughts on that yourself. But I think that there's some value in considering the idea of proprietary systems in order to make the user experience that much better.
Yeah, I mean, I think the user experience does need to come first, and sometimes we may have to do things that would probably give some people nightmares. There was a project at Kobo a couple of years back where we were selling some comic books, which were all fixed layout EPUB files, and we weren't happy with the performance, especially around turning pages. And for me, working on iOS, which is a fairly restricted lockdown platform, some of that is just the nature of working with Apple's WebKit and having to render large web pages. And I think one of the points of comparison was Amazon's more proprietary KF whatever comic format. I can't even remember which one it was, but the pages loaded super fast because they were just images. So we ended up creating a renderer to handle fixed layout books as purely a sequence of images, and we ended up using a bunch of regular expressions and other logic to try to determine whether a book could be loaded that way. And so, we were working outside the guidelines, I think, but it ended up with a really good user experience and no ill effects. And so I think when you can have the experience closer entwined with the content and how exactly you expect it to appear, you can improve things for the user, but you lose flexibility for sure.
To that point about creating the content or creating the ebook in such a way that it's serving the content first or the user first, are there other viable ways of delivering content that are out there besides fixed layout or reflowable? So often it seems like it's a either or choice. Are there other choices, other options out there that we've seen live in the market for delivering content in a way that serves the content and serves the user experience?
I don't think within the confines of EPUB itself we've really seen that, but maybe some of the more like interactive book apps and sort of standalone projects.
We've actually begun an initiative to kind of sidestep this whole issue. The craft and design and art departments of F&W have experimented with making enhanced books with video, with tutorials and step-by-step instructions with videos, and they have not sold so well, and we're not quite sure why, except that perhaps, say you want to find out how to sew a button, what do most of us do? We go to YouTube. So this year, we have been tasked with taking content that we would have considered enhancements in an ebook, moving it to YouTube. They actually hired a YouTube expert. I had no idea there was such a thing. But he is tasked with getting that kind of content out there, and then from there trying to sell our print and basic reflowable ebooks. So it's kind of a reverse strategy. And I think having videos locked in an ebook, while it can be convenient, it's not so easily updatable as it might be if just floating on YouTube.
And I think we have to remember too that we're talking about different kinds of content. I mean, how many of you publishers out here publish fiction? How many of you publish nonfiction? How many of you publish comic books, manga, that kind of thing, right? I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of content that are going to sell in different kinds of ways. The majority of ebook content is fiction. That's the majority of what people buy is fiction. So, yeah, we've seen some opportunities where publishers have taken the content they have and put it up on the web somewhere, or they found a way of using other tools to develop websites that have the content in it. I think it depends on the content. You can't necessarily do the same thing with a novel that you could with that sewing book. There's going to be you have to have a reason to do it, a way of marketing it, getting it in front of consumers, and that's where publishers are struggling and trying to learn and trying to grow is how can we market directly to our consumers? How can we even know who our consumers are? I mean, the majority of readers, especially of fiction, don't even know the name of the publisher of their favorite book. How many people know who published the Harry Potter series? They probably care less about that than they do about the fact that it was written by somebody that they know and they recognize. Right? They know the author. And I think that's important for us to realize is that publishers are struggling with this, but it shouldn't be it's not a one-step solution for everything. We can't just say, this is going to work for all of our content. We have to be specific about that and deal with it specifically.
We have had some luck selling our Crimson Romance series. So it's ebook only, and our authors publicize their books a lot, and our Crimson series has gained a fair amount of followers. So now we are selling those ebooks direct from our website, which has been pretty successful. You know, in the back of the book, we'll say, if you liked this romance, you might like that one. And we sell them DRM free, not dirt cheap, but at a reasonable price. And so far, that's been fairly successful for us.
I think it would be interesting to see more publishers go DRM free as well, especially because, you know, maybe the idea of what an ebook is can sort of expand from there, because if you're not locked in to a specific file type with a specific set of DRM rules on it, then if the end consumer just sees like, hey, I'm paying money and I get this book, probably won't matter to them what the file is if it's some interesting, good experience.
We do have to post a very long set of instructions about side loading. If you own a Kobo, do this. If you own a Kindle Fire, do this. It's we spent a lot of time on that, and we still get questions.
Whoever
so part
cracks
of
that
it.
nut is going to be a millionaire.
Oh yes.
Okay, well, since we're coming to the end, I'd really like to open this up and ask the audience if there are any questions or comments or rants or deep desire to vent or commiserate. There are 2 microphones.
Oh, you're all more opinionated than that. Come on.
Come on.
Joshua, I think you're being too soft on Amazon, too generous. The relationship between them and their customers, it seems to me, is at best two-way. And it's not just, I don't think it's just a matter of them trying to meet their customers' need, but actually trying to fashion their customers' needs, trying to fashion what an ebook should be like. They have the money, and they're getting close to monopolizing the situation so that they have the ability to do that. And it seems to me that one of the reasons why we're here together as publishers and why we belong to publishers associations and so on is to prevent that monopolization from happening, to try to figure out some way of leveraging the situation so that there isn't dominance within that market. That should open up more innovation, it seems to me. Now, the other, obviously Amazon's not the only one in that kind of who poses that kind of a threat, quote unquote. Apple and maybe Kobo, who knows. The main providers, I think, are Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and maybe Barnes & Noble. I'm not sure. If they ever got together, obviously, there may be a lot of advantages for us, but it seems that they're actually diverging in what they need for the ebook experience, and that's making things more difficult for us. We're not exerting much of a clout, it seems, as a collective of publishers on that process. Or am I missing something? Are there ways of preventing certain large corporations from changing the customer experience in a way that serves only them and maybe not the more general needs of publishers?
I think there's actually 2 separate issues here. The issue of monopolization, that's a legal issue and something that I think should be handled legally. The issue of customers and what customers want and whether Amazon is kind of helping push them or nudge them in a certain direction, they're succeeding at that because they know their customers. They're succeeding at that because they know how to sell stuff. I mean, you can go on Amazon and you look at one thing and suddenly you're looking at 4 other things that had nothing to do with the one thing you started looking at. I'm going to buy a grill because I was going to go buy an ebook that had nothing to do about cooking. But that's because Amazon is really good at selling stuff. And I think that what publishing needs to do, what we as an industry need to do, is learn how to do that ourselves. Learn from them what they're doing and figure out how to compete with them in what they're doing. There's a difference, I think, between addressing the core problem and addressing the symptoms of the problem. The symptoms are the monopolization. I think the core problem is that we don't know how to sell to our customers. We don't know who our customers are. And we can't rely on Amazon to give us that information, so how are we going to compete? We compete in the same marketplace by learning what they're doing, learning how to compete. And it's a new thing. It's not something that's normal for most of publishing. So, yeah, there are monopolistic, potentially, legal issues there, and there are ways, I think, for publishers to gain influence in the marketplace by dealing with those issues as well. But it's not going to fix the core problem that we don't know how to sell our books.
And Amazon isn't really big publishers' friend. If we want them to promote our books and kind of bump them up, like in, brick and mortar stores, publishers would pay a premium to be on end caps. Amazon charges us a lot of money to bump us up in recommendations. It's a lot, and some years we refused to pay it, and we saw a decrease in sales. On the other hand, they're the only vendor that sells us error reports. Franco here reduced our list. We had about 300 books that had errors either found by Amazon or customers, and he's reduced it to 5. So fix those 5 when we get back. But he's been amazing, and we really credit Amazon for being able to have this information, and once we fix that ebook, we send it all out back again. So we have this love-hate relationship with Amazon that, frankly, I don't think is going to end.
And I mean, that could be an opportunity for Kobo and some other vendors in terms of maybe better distributing analytics around how publishers' content is being read and providing those insights. Because I can't imagine Amazon's going to share that stuff, but maybe one of the others. But I mean, how long is it until publishers are like embedding Google Analytics into their own books to sort of try to figure that stuff out? And at what point are these really even books anymore? Are they just like little packaged websites?
We try to harvest emails from people who buy our ebooks, but that just seems evil. I don't really condone that.
Any other questions or comments from the audience?
I'm a current graduate student at Emerson College, and my question for the panel is, what advice do you have for students like myself who are interested in working in e-production? Should we continue to experiment, such as right now the class that I'm in is doing like a lot of experimental interactive type of books, or should we keep it practical, or just, is there any other advice that you would have for students?
I think it's great to get as broad a range of knowledge as you can, because again, there's context. When you get hired by someone who's going to want your skills, it's going to be in the context of their content, their workflow, whatever in-house talent they have. So if they can draw on your vast range and have you apply it to their scenario, what will also happen is there will be a lot of on-the-job training. I mean, so many of us are learning on the job all the time. So I think it's good to know a lot and then be able to apply it in a very specific way.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like good advice, especially having some sort of specialty that sets you apart from maybe a lot of the other candidates is helpful. But I would just say maybe try to like lean more towards the technology side of the publishing technology equation, and that should open up more opportunities.
Yeah. And I'll build on that by saying, learn how to program, learn how to code, be a programmer, because honestly, we don't need more ebook developers. You know?
What? I can hire programmers.
You can hire programmers, but the problem is you're already in a publishing program, right? And Emerson has a really great program. The thing is that, as you saw from the presentations today and even some yesterday, automation is where we're headed in production. So you have to be able to automate things. You have to be able to understand how to do it. You have to understand what it means to do it and how to execute it. That's going to set you apart. That, I think, is the key thing that will set you apart from other people if you're looking to get hired at a publisher, is the fact that you can help them automate processes to build better e-production, systems. You'll still need to know how to build that one-off, bespoke ebook, because you've got that one book that you really want to do by hand. But building production processes that are automated is going to be much more important in the future. So learn that first, get that in there as well, make sure you've got that training.
Great advice. Any other questions or comments?
We haven't even started a fist fight yet. Come on.
Yeah, who disagrees with us? Come on.
You must have some
He
opinions.
disagreed. I responded.
I'll get a chance later.
Okay, well, if there's no other comments, questions from the audience, then, oh, wait, hold on.
I'll start a fight.
There you go. Go, Debbie, go.
No, actually, being an ebook developer and doing a process are very different jobs. So if you wanted one, you probably wouldn't be doing the other. That's what I was thinking. The process thing seems a little dull to me. I'd rather make stuff.
Yeah.
There's
I'm with
a
you on
lack
that.
of like fun, creative toyness to a work process. You know what I mean?
The problem is that most of the processes that have been created recently, at least, are being created by non-ebook developers. They don't know ebooks. They're great at making processes. They're great programmers, but they know nothing about ebooks, and they'll create this whole system that doesn't actually do something that's useful for ebook production, or they hit it kind of halfway, and then the ebook developers have to come in and say, well, come on, you did that? Why did you do that? You know, this is what I need. And so I think there's a lot of benefit in someone being able to do both, someone knowing both sides of the equation.
But what happens, I think, is then those of us who do know, because we were just talking about this, is that person then takes their hands out of the code and becomes the management part of it. And that is what it is.
Yeah, and it's tough. Yeah, I understand.
But yeah, definitely coming at it from both sides puts you at a real advantage. I mean, you'd probably be even surprised how many people at Kobo are really only versed in one side of that equation. Like, you'll have a lot of people who can build the processes, and then a lot of people who know about ebook development. And there's only a few people with the overlap.
Luckily, right now, we're only at a process of 2, so we're safe where we
safe.
are.
Yeah.
Okay, we still have time for more questions or comments.
So
Sorry, go ahead.
you mentioned, I think it was in a conversation we had before, about the question of paper and the question of, so I'm going to throw out there, and just a show of hands, who thinks that every book should be an ebook? Good. Oh, come on, Derek.
You said you wanted to fight, so.
I'll let you fight with everybody else then, because I'm not going to fight with you. Okay.
In case you didn't hear, it depends on your definition of ebook.
Yeah, but I think the question of, the content that we're putting out there is content, but the form of it is important as well. And there will be cases, I think, where you just don't get the same experience. I mean, pop-up books are probably one of the prime examples of that. Your kid is going to get a different experience from a pop-up book than they're going to get from an app on an iPad. It's just a different experience, and I would want my kids to get both experiences, but I would want them to get both, not just one or the other. And I think there's still value in print. I think there's still value in considering the form. And go ahead and stand up at the microphone. The form, in addition to the function, you have to think about all the different aspects. I mean, different types of paper that we print on today give a different feel and a different concept for the content that you're putting across.
Well, I think part of that is also that we have to recognize, and I think you mentioned this earlier, book is actually a very ambiguous term. It encompasses a ton of things. I don't necessarily consider a pop-up book to be a book. If you were to sit down, if you were to put a kid or if I had a kid and I was going to put a book in front of them, and the point was that they read and learn how to read, a pop-up book doesn't fill that need.
Yeah, but my 4-year-old girl was, when she was 4, she wasn't reading yet. So pop-up books were great because she could see the things happening on the page, read the couple of words that she was able to read, and get a great experience. And there's a different reason to have different types of books too.
Right, but I think to that specific point, it's just, you could say an app is a playing app is probably closer to that experience than, say, a book that is teaching a kid to read. So again, I think just like Naomi was saying, that ebook is very ambiguous, so is book as a terminology. And I think that's, you really do have to slice it much thinner than that to really sort of break down, like, well, what exactly do we need to do to digitize this particular thing? Like, is it the experience itself, or is it the content? Like, what are we actually trying to accomplish out of getting this out?
Right.
Yeah.
I liked Rebecca's example when she talked about the largest size viewing area on a tablet, and thinking about what if you have a beautiful 4-color art book that trim size is larger than a tablet? What would be the point of digitizing that? So you're looking at the content on a smaller screen and having to zoom. To me, that's an example of maybe the print book would be more appropriate.
I think you have one last question.
Last, maybe. So there is one aspect which bothers me. I realize that this is an e-book conference, but we have to realize that the EPUB format is not only for books.
Right.
There's a huge market out there where EPUB has an enormous future. In one of the areas where I'm active in is scholarly publishing. You know, today journal papers are online. The only format that is widely used today is PDF with all the, and I don't want to go there. So this whole issue about whether EPUB is a standard or not, whether we accept the siloization of the various readers, for me, this is very book-specific. Mm-hmm. But EPUB is way more than that, and we tend to forget that. And one more comment on this siloization. I am from W3C, so I have my memories of what at least our community called the web browser war. And you may remember, let's say, 10 years ago when we had these websites which said, viewed optimally on Internet Explorer 5 or whatever. Now, what we have to realize that this war is over because all the browser manufacturers, in a way, realized, and the community realized, that this does not work. Today, at W3C, we have this amazing situation where all the big browser manufacturers are there. Of course, they fight. Of course, I mean, that's what they are there for. But they are all there, and they are competing to be as standard compliant as possible. Mm-hmm. So it has changed, and I would hope for, and I would expect that on long term, we see the same thing for ebook readers.
Yeah, I agree that it's a great hope. I don't know that it's a practicality for some ebook readers. I mean, you brought up the question of scholarly publishing, and this was brought up yesterday in one of the workshops. And one of the points that came up, and I can't remember for the life of me who said it, but one of the points that came up was that scholarly publishing is still using, I mean, all the journals are still in PDF. And the point was made that the reason for that is that annotation capabilities on PDF are just that much better because the functionality is so much better. So we need to see an increase in the functionality. That's not something that's going to be consistent from reading system to reading system as long as there are financial incentives or disincentives across those different reading systems. I think that that's where we run into the bigger problem. Yeah. You know, with web browsers, they're all competing in exactly the same space, getting people to use their browser to navigate the web. And the amount of difference in functionality today between those is very minimal. So, but it's not the same thing when you're talking about different types of content in ebook forms being used by different types of people for different types of reasons. So there's incentive and disincentives across the board, I think.
It would be nice, and I don't have access to any of that, but it would be nice to have some archives of some panel that took place, let's say, more than 10 years ago, exactly on the same topic around browsers, and maybe the same arguments were said. Because back then, yes, there were different functionalities in the various browsers, and they tried to lock people in. Not only on the HTML level, but let's say on the API. We heard about JavaScript a lot today. On the API level, there were huge differences among browsers, which made them, you know, view optimally on IE. So I realize it's very tough, but I am not yet old enough to give up hope. And actually, it's funny you talk about annotation. This is a very good example because this is one of the work that is going on right now to define a standard annotation mechanism, exactly for the reasons you say. Yeah. And for scholarly publishing, obviously, this is very important. On the other hand, PDF with all my friendly attitude to PDF, there are things that it cannot do that scholarly publishing needs, like attaching, research data, for example, to the publication or things like that. So there is still a lot to do, but to come as well.
I hate to interrupt because this is a really interesting discussion, and I hope to see you both continuing it at the pub, congenially and in a friendly way. But I do want to make sure we give our next speaker his ample time. So I'd like to thank our panelists for their thoughts and other questions.